Next are our fallacies of avoidance. Right? As I mentioned before, fallacies of avoidance are those made when you either attempt to avoid a critique by your opponent, or in addressing your opponent's own arguments, uh, you avoid the point that they're making, right? Or you avoid their point. So an argument that avoids the issue is no argument at all, right? Because an argument has to be, logically speaking, and I'm going to refer to a Monty Python sketch here called Argument Clinic. An argument is not the automatic gainsaying of, it's not just contradiction, which is the automatic gainsaying of whatever one person says by another. Um, it is a series of propositions put forth to establish a particular conclusion. Right? Uh, and if you're avoiding, your opponent's points and critiques when you're addressing, when they're addressing you or you're addressing them, then you're not having an argument. You're talking past each other, right? An argument is very much like a conversation, right? As far as logic is concerned and philosophy is concerned, that's what an argument is, right? Not the common sense understanding that an argument is screaming at each other and pointing and finger pointing. No, it's very much a discussion, right? Between you and an imagined audience, or between you and a particular opponent. Think of it more like debate. So, some fallacies of avoidance, right, are ad hominem, ad populum, also known as the bandwagon fallacy, unclear or shifting conclusions, changing meaning, and again, slippery slope. Right? Um, so what the inclusion of slippery slope also emphasizes is that a number of these arguments, these fallacies, can fall into multiple groups. It's a matter of depending on how they're used, right? Um, you see slippery slope used a lot to avoid the points and arguments that one political group makes on, by the opposing political group, and they use it as a way of changing the focus of the argument, right? So that they don't have to deal with their opponent's own initial point. In which case, the slippery slope fallacy is not just a fallacy of argument, it's a fallacy of avoidance, right? Because they're literally using it to avoid, right? The existing argument and set up a new one instead. So ad hominem means to the person, right? And it means attacking the person, right? So rather than make your argument, you disparage a person's character, the character of the person who's making, your the opposing argument. You disparage your opponent, basically, rather than address the argument itself. Trump, in particular, likes to do this, right? You see it. He obfuscates by and dances. I just quoted Hamilton. I'm sorry. I've been on a Hamilton kick. Um, so yeah, so Trump avoids addressing points by people who, criticize him, by first attacking them and then saying, "Oh, we're doing a great job," and things like that. Um, Bush did similar things. Both Bushes, actually, to a startlingly lesser degree. Ad populum, the bandwagon fallacy, is arguing that something is right just because the majority accepts it as so. Right? This is essentially, kind of the reverse of this is what your mother used on you when you were a kid. If your friends all jumped off of a bridge, would you jump off of it too? Right? Would you do it just because it's popular? Um, it's not quite the reverse, but it gives you some idea of framing the notion. Uh, the idea that something, because a lot of people believe in something, it must be true. That's the bandwagon fallacy, or ad populum. Unclear or shifting conclusions is the okay, so this is having either a vague conclusion, one that's not precise, right, that allows for multiple interpretations, so it can actually fit a whole wide range of rather unconnected points can fit into it, or shifting your goalposts, right? Saying that this is my conclusion, and then you see that, oh, my argument doesn't actually lend itself to to this conclusion, and so you change what it is that your conclusion is meant to be. So the problem with unclear or shifting conclusions is that any point worth making in any argument worth crafting is worth doing so as clearly as you can, right? That means setting a solid conclusion, knowing what you're arguing for, and going after that in a methodical way. Uh, and part of that means not shifting the goalpost or not being vague or ambiguous about what your conclusion what the conclusion ought to be. All right, and then finally we have changing meaning. Uh, this has to do when you take a term that runs throughout your argument as a technical term with a specific definition, and you change or tweak the meaning somewhat so that it better fits your argument and the points you're making it in one place where the term wouldn't before. Right? Um, and this can be used to also make a false point, right? You can equivocate between two different meanings of the word to say that, oh, yeah, because it's the case here, this unrelated understanding that's in my conclusion, uh, or because I've proven it's the case over here, this unrelated understanding of that same term that's in my conclusion shows that, I'm right. So you want to be careful and consistent about what terms you use and what they mean. Uh, it can make your writing a little bit blander, but if you have specific terms that you use, right, uh, that also can help provide structure to your own thinking. So it's useful in that way.